what I learned early on was that trust and safety is a math problem. It's about gathering all the data about all the transactions and defining the good ones and the bad ones. All right, we're going to take all the good transactions, we're going to put them in this pile. We're going to take all the ones that went wrong for what reasons, and we're going to code the different reasons, and then we're going to see how do the good ones look different than the bad ones, and then we're going to build models to help us recognize those patterns, and then iterate on the models. And so it was a fascinating learning experience, really, for me, because I wasn't a math person. But what I was able to do was I was able to draw on an incredible pool of talent at eBay.
What role does integrity need to play in your company's culture? How can legal teams and corporate leaders foster it? And where do you get started if you want to write a book on it? Today, we are joined on the abstract by Rob Chesnut, author of Intentional Integrity: How Smart Companies Can Lead an Ethical Revolution. Rob has a little bit of a leg to stand on here. He was previously the chief ethics officer and before that the general counsel of Airbnb, where he grew the legal team from 30 to over 150 legal professionals all around the globe. He was also the first legal hire and general counsel at Chegg, where he helped lead them through their IPO. And earlier in his career, he was the third legal hire at and leader of eBay's North American legal team, where he founded their trust and safety org. Earlier in his career, Rob was an AUSA in the Eastern District of Virginia. And this is pretty interesting. I don't know if you've been asked about this on many podcasts, where he handled the prosecution of folks in the intelligence community around espionage, including Aldrich Ames. Rob, thanks so much for joining me for this episode of The Abstract.
Hey, Tyler, thanks for having
me. Okay, I mean, let's actually go back to like that time when you were working at DOJ and in the, in the Eastern District's office of DOJ, prosecuting some of these espionage cases. I mean, that seems to me like a fast track to being general counsel of the FBI or CIA or NSA or something like that. Why did you decide to transition to the Bay Area at a certain point and make that move into tech?
I think being a prosecutor is a hard work emotionally. It's the people that you prosecute are going away for the rest of their life.
Sure.
You see the families in the courtroom. It's sad. And it's important work. But after a while, I did over 100 bank robberies and drug dealers and armored car robbers and all that, as well as the espionage.
Wow.
And I think it wears on you a little emotionally. You want to do something positive. You want to feel as though you're not sort of coming in at the very end of a troubled life. You want to feel like you're bringing people's lives up and helping. So I always liked business and always, I was the kind of person that walked into a store and wondered why they had a display date, why they price things this way. So I thought that business was a really great opportunity to have a positive impact on a lot of different people's lives, and therefore decided I was going to try to make the transition from being a prosecutor to go to the business world. The problem I found when I started shopping my resume around is that the businesses looked at me and said, "Hey, Rob, you're a really good prosecutor, but we don't prosecute people here." It definitely took a little selling and a little creativity to help show how I could bring value to a business environment.
And you were early at eBay. Where was eBay in its journey when you joined? And how much did it grow while you were there?
Well, I was employee 107.
Oh, wow.
15,000 when I left. So it grew like crazy. I remember when I started, we were in one building on like 2.5 floors of one building. It was a small group of folks, but it was fun. It was, we were changing the world.
Yeah.
And doing it in a positive way. I mean, I felt like I was, enabling commerce, among strangers. connect across the world or around common passions. It was exactly what I was looking for when I was a federal prosecutor and feeling like I wasn't doing anything positive.
You ended up, as I mentioned in the intro, standing up the trust and safety function there and running that. I mean, number one, it doesn't sound like there wasn't a whole lot of that happening at tech companies yet at the time. Like you were standing up one of the sort of first trust and safety orgs that was out there. Yeah, I'm wondering what you drew on to think about sort of like what are our principles? How are we going to design this? How are we going to build this culture of compliance or trust into the org? Yeah, I mean, let's start there. I'm really curious about that. I mean, that's really building something, right?
Trust and safety. We actually, there were three of us sitting in a room, and we came up with the phrase "trust and safety" is the name of the department. So I think this whole uh, this whole world of trust and safety that all the companies have now, I think it started with three of us in a room at eBay in the early days. And you're right. When Meg Whitman came to me and asked me to do it, I looked at her and said, "Well, I'm a lawyer." And yeah, but I think you could figure it out, and we'll give you the people you need, and we'll give you an unlimited budget, which I then
That's
proceeded.
pretty good.
And what I learned early on was that trust and safety is a math problem. It's about gathering all the data about all the transactions and defining the good ones and the bad ones. All right, we're going to take all the good transactions, we're going to put them in this file. We're going to take all the ones that went wrong for what reasons, and we're going to code the different reasons, and then we're going to see how do the good ones look different than the bad ones, and then we're going to build models to help us recognize those patterns, and then iterate on the models. And so it was a fascinating learning experience, really, for me, because I wasn't a math person. But
Right.
what I was able to do was I was able to draw on an incredible pool of talent at eBay. There were a lot of really smart people, and we built a great team of data analytics folks and people that really just enjoyed working in a open kind of creative environment. We were the first ones building something. There were no third party companies that offered tools. We had to build our own, and that was a great environment to work in.
Was there a point in time at eBay where you started to think, "Hey, I'd love to be a GC of a company someday," or this is going to be an important step for me in my career? Or do you feel like that happened more organically?
I thought I might want to look. Whenever you're a lawyer, uh, everybody kind of looks at the career path. So you either want to be a
Sure.
partner or you want to be a general counsel. And I think of course, it crossed my mind. We had a great general counsel at eBay. His name was Mike Jacobson, and it was very clear Mike wasn't going to leave anytime soon. So if I was going to be a general counsel, I knew I'd have to go elsewhere, which is great. And
Hmm.
Mike and I are great friends to this day. We're having lunch this week together. And he taught me a lot. The trust and safety job, sometimes careers aren't a ladder; they're a jungle gym, and they go in different directions. And if you have your eyes just fixated on what you see as the next rung of the ladder, you may miss a really cool opportunity.
Hmm.
Ultimately, what I did in the area of trust and safety got me into the executive suite and gave me training that I never would have had if I had just been a pure lawyer during that period. And it actually advanced my career quite a bit. So, my lesson from all of it is be open-minded. Don't be fixated on what you think is the career, the next
Hmm.
step. Be open to different paths, because often the different path, the side path, can actually get you more experience, can diversify your background, and
Hmm.
ultimately enhance your career more than if you're just slogging it out, waiting for the person ahead of you to retire.
I'm curious if during this time frame there were any mentors that you had that were important in helping shape your view around this. And also, if those were maybe the same mentors you had back when you were in government as a prosecutor, or if you, as you moved into the private sector and started to think more about corporate law, if you felt like you had to make new ones, right? It's not to say that the national security partner at the law firm isn't going to give great advice, but is probably thinking about things through a slightly different lens, maybe, than someone who's going to mentor you in the Bay.
I look at the phrase mentor a little differently than most people. Mentors for me are, everybody I work with is a mentor in a way, even if they may be junior to me, on an org chart. I'm always curious and trying to learn from everybody that I work with. So, there are, literally hundreds of mentors for me, that in the sense that there are hundreds of people that taught me things I didn't know, or showed me a different way to do things or approach a problem that I never would have come up with on my own. I mean, they're natural. Like, I mentioned Mike Jacobson as the general counsel. There was Maynard Webb, who was the COO of eBay, Dan Rosenthal, CEO at Chegg. A lot of people who were my bosses who taught me a lot, and I'm very grateful to them. But I'm also really grateful to people that worked in departments for me in that sense, or people who worked in other departments cross-functionally. You learn from everybody.
Yeah.
And I think if you're not open to learning from a lot of different people, regardless of what their title is, you're missing opportunities.
Just an observation, I guess, there. I feel like a lot of the, we'll say, product people or founders that I've had the chance to work with, they've changed my sort of perspective on what it means to lean in and create something from scratch, right? Or outline a vision. I guess I'm curious how maybe some of the CEOs that you've had a chance to work with, a lot of whom are really fantastic product people, may have evolved your view of what's possible, even as being a GC, in terms of building programs or creating new narratives in the industry. Anything there that's interesting?
I mean, I came out of government. I'm worried about that. I didn't go to business school. So I had a lot to learn. So Meg taught me a ton. For example, I have tremendous respect for her. Dan Rosenzweig at Chegg. And look, Brian Chesky. What's interesting about Brian Chesky at Airbnb, a founder of Airbnb, CEO of Airbnb. Brian never went to business school. Brian, I could be wrong. I think the Airbnb job founding CEO might have been his first real job.
Something like that, yeah.
Design school. He went to the Rhode Island School of Design. And what's interesting is, in my observation of Brian, I actually think that that's his strength, in that he didn't have a traditional background. He viewed problems with a design eye. So he always would encourage us to imagine or design the ideal solution to a problem. Don't get caught up in how things have always been done or how they are usually done. Take a step back and create the ideal vision and try to get there. And so, even though I had learned from some other great CEOs and learned a lot of business stuff, I learned with new eyes, I think, when I went to work for Airbnb and for Brian, because he had such a different approach to business.
That's super interesting. I want to talk more about Airbnb in just a second. But one other question for you about these sort of GC roles broadly. How do you know when it's the right time to move on to the next thing? Or because you've had some amazing jobs and you've been GC of some amazing businesses. How have you tried to think through when it's the right time to do something new or go on to what's next?
I'm the kind of person that operates, I think, in 5-year cycles. And by old, it's different. They can stay in the same place and do, sort of the same job for 20, 25 years, and that's fine. What I find is that usually when I take on a new job, I'm not qualified for it. At least half of it, I don't no idea what I'm doing, and then I learn it, and that takes several years. But when you get out to around 5 years of doing something, hopefully by then you've made a mark. You've taken your background, your skills, your life experiences, you've imprinted them on that organization, and you've had an impact and hopefully been successful. But you also don't want to get stale. You want to push yourself again. You want to do,
Mm-hmm.
you want to jump into another situation where you feel as though you don't know what you're doing. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
or the growth, I think the growth comes from the new challenge. So it wasn't intentional. It wasn't like anybody ever said, there's no book out there called the 5-year cycle. I think just for me, I've seen in my career, every 5 years, I've done something different,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was with the Justice Department, even at the same company at eBay. I was 5 years trust and safety, but also 5 years running North American legal. 5, 6 years in Airbnb, 5, 6 years at Chegg. Justice Department, I was a line prosecutor and then became supervised the major crimes unit and did espionage cases, which is completely different. So I just, for whatever reason, it seems to me that it seems to come up in a cyclical way with me in around 5 years.
Maybe that should be the title of your next book.
Yeah, the 5-year career, and really great. I'm afraid that it's individual to each person. I
Mhm.
think person, for different people, they're different signs or different things in their career that they look for when they move on. And I think just maybe it's coincidence, but oddly enough, for me, it's just been 5-year cycles.
Joining Airbnb, what was that business like when you joined and stepped in, and where was the legal org at? And yeah, where did you want to take it to?
Oh, well, talk about the legal org first. Legal org was about 20 people when I took over.
Okay.
Is and when I left, it was about 150.
Mhm.
So I think when I took it over, the company was really exploding,
Mhm.
and legal function needed to be scaled to match the scale of the business, and it needed to be scaled in a global way.
Sure.
So, trying to operate everything out of one building in San Francisco, um, legally wasn't going to work. It worked well in the past. It just wasn't going to work for the new era of Airbnb. So, I mean, the most important thing I did while I was general counsel at Airbnb was I hired, um, you know, 3 terrific regional general counsel, one for Asia, one for Europe, and one for Central South America, Mexico, and and if you hire a great leader, then you can work together with them to scale out an organization within your region.
Mhm.
And so that was, I think, what it was. There was work that needed to be done, in North America and in the U.S. But I think there was an exploding amount of legal work. The business was generating not just work, but work that was legal intensive.
Mhm.
And so it was a scaling job in a lot of which I love. I love, again, at eBay, it was, 170 to 15,000. I enjoy the process of taking something that's rolling, but needs a legal department that can support the growth, not hold it back. But and
Mhm. It seems to me that one of the toughest nuts to crack in scaling an org like that is prioritization, like deciding what to focus on and when to focus on it. And especially with a business like Airbnb that was sort of exploding, what can be kicked down the road, like what sort of risks need to be dealt with today. Do you have an approach that you take to that sort of thing, or is that too cute of a question?
keep people off the power of which means you do, bro. You do all 5 of whatever. Yeah. You may not have the luxury of kicking certain things down the road, or certain things down the road may make the problem a lot worse. So
Hmm.
look, sure, there's prioritization. But you can't, you can't, you have to be careful that you don't get caught up in the tyranny of the urgent. Um,
Hmm.
because if all you're dealing with is today's problem, you're going to miss opportunities to prevent tomorrow's problem.
Hmm.
So it sounds like a cop out answer, but I prioritization, yes, but you don't always have the luxury of being able to put certain things, some things maybe, but a lot of times you can't put these things on the shelf, which may mean you've got to do a number of things at once.
I love that phrase, tyranny of the urgent. That's good. I'm going to use that elsewhere. I think there's
That can be a book too.
That could
Okay,
be.
look at the 5-year career and the tyranny of the urgent. This is
Look at this. It's a brainstorming session. um, One more question for you on the GC role itself. I don't know. What are you most proud of having accomplished while you were there? If you look back at your tenure as GC before you became chief ethics officer.
for any leader, it had better be the people.
Hmm.
Because if it's about an individual accomplishment of mine, in a sense, it won't last.
Sure.
And it starts to dissipate the moment you walk out the door. I think the legacy, my legacy is the people that were in that 200 to 150, because each of them, in a way, I either directly or indirectly played a role in bringing them in, either through interviewing, recruiting, myself, but or laying a philosophy or a framework for how we were going to operate, and therefore the type of person that we wanted to add to the company. So I think it's and look, a number of those people are still there. I talked about those regional people. Had coffee with all of them recently. They're all still there at the company, and therefore I think the lasting legacy of what I did were bringing in really talented people who are passionate about Airbnb.
I guess you're not on the interview panels anymore, so it doesn't have to be a secret. Are there any signature Rob Chesnut interview questions that you like to ask that others might be able to steal and use as they're building out their own legal teams?
Yeah, that's I would never want to answer that question while I was still general counsel, because I don't want to you don't want to give away questions. I always liked to ask people to imagine a conference room where the conference room had 20 people in there, their key people that worked for you and with you, and your bosses, a blend over the course of your career. And I asked them to imagine the conversation that would go on in the room when I threw your name out. And I'd say, give me phrases of things that you would hear. Not that they're right, but what would they say about what you're really good at? And what would they say about things that you needed to grow and do better? And would there be any arguments in the room between different people? And what I found is that it's a version of the question of tell me what you're good at and what you're not good at. But I got more honesty and more reflection by putting it in the third party of hearing what other people in your different organizations would say about you. I got interesting candor, because what I really wanted, I didn't want to be sold in an interview, because everybody's got development points. But I wanted self-awareness. I wanted people to demonstrate self-awareness and authenticity and candor. I felt like I got more of it when I phrased it in the imaginary conference room set.
That's really interesting. It requires introspection. I like that. Yeah.
You almost distract people from trying to sell themselves by forcing them to get their head inside that conference room, and authenticity that way.
That's cool. Okay. So, chugging along as GC, maybe you're 5 years into GC or so at Airbnb. Where did the idea for creating a sort of chief ethics officer position come from? And I will say, I think what's unique about the way that you took it over too is you had stature right alongside all other members. This isn't like a compliance officer who sits under the GC who runs internal investigations, right? There's a difference, I think.
The roots of it came from Uber and the problems Uber was having far before that. If you remember the Susan Fowler blog post,
sure,
and it really tore Uber apart. The Me Too movement was starting, and I remember trying to get ahead of problems. I went into Brian and talked to Brian about Uber and the various issues they had, because Uber, like it or not, Uber and Airbnb were often compared. They were right down the street from each other. In San Francisco, both, young founders, and started at about the same time. And so I looked at it as I like to learn from other people's mistakes. how can we do something so that we don't fall into the same trap that Uber fell into? Because that
Sure.
is a huge, just a huge moment for Uber. It derailed the company, and they never have completely recovered, I think, from that.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, ended up leaving the company as a result. So I went to talk to Brian, and Brian and I had the conversation. How do you drive integrity into the culture of a company? It's kind of an interesting question. And again, Brian's not going to let me get away with the traditional answers. Like the traditional answer is, well, you have a code of ethics.
Sure.
I mean, when you think about it, well, the code of ethics is something that actually your law firm probably had on their computer, and they put your company name in it. And then they sent it over to you, and you sent it out to all the employees and asked them to click a button certifying that they read it, when of course they probably didn't read it.
Right.
Somebody comes to you and says, hey, we hit 100%. Let's check that box. That doesn't change cultures. So Brian looked at me and said, go out and go big, which is very Brian. So I went out and started really thinking about this issue of how you could make integrity part of the culture of a company. And we actually developed an integrity program, different, not a compliance program.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference between compliance and integrity. Some people mix it up. Compliance is doing something because you got to do it.
Sure.
Because lawyers tell you have to do it. And nobody likes to be told that they've got to do something. And the fact that lawyers tell them to do it, they look at it as a chore that they do only because they must. Integrity is doing something because it's the right thing to do, because it aligns with your values. It's far more inspiring. Mm-hmm. So we developed a program to drive integrity out into the culture, to do the right thing because it was the right thing, not because the law required. And we tried a number of different programs. I based it actually on some science. I went and met with a behavioral psychologist at Duke University and did some reading about it and really thought deeply about this idea. And what shocked me, because I'm old compared to a lot of people. I'm thinking, well, how these young people are going to look. People loved it. And I got to say, I was shocked. Mm-hmm. We did a number of things. We did an integrity talk as part of orientation, and people, were a little surprised. There were 25 units as part of orientation at Airbnb. Every new employee had to go through it, and they did evaluations. So I thought, well, we'll try an orientation section. I'll do it myself. I'll come in and I will teach it. It was 90 minutes. Mm-hmm. What the review said. After 2 months, the integrity class was ranked number 1 by participants.
Wow.
25 classes. And what it taught me was that people were hungry for this sort of thing. Mm-hmm. People want to work at a place that has values aligned with their own. I had one woman come up to me in tears after the integrity talk, literally in tears. I'm thinking, oh my God, what did I do? And she said, Rob, I was just working at X big tech company in the Valley. My boss kept coming on to me, propositioning me. And I knew that the company wasn't going to do anything about it if I reported it. I had to leave my job. She said, you have no idea what it means to walk into my new company and to have the general counsel come in and talk about how what sort of behavior was not going to be tolerated. And he was available anytime, day or night. Mm-hmm. If you're experiencing a problem that he wants to know, because he's not putting up with it. And, I think people kind of appreciated the fact that, look, we wanted to stand for something, not just following the law, but trying to do the right thing. And it resonated with people. I'll give you another example of something we did that was very popular.
Sure.
Everybody has these compliance videos you watch, right? On sexual harassment. Well, you're smiling. You know what I'm talking about.
Unfortunately, yes.
Everybody resents it. Everybody, So I go home. I'm talking to my kids, and I'm about the problems at work. And my kids are, teenagers, 18, 19. And they look at me and say, a 90-minute video? You're making people watch a 90-minute video? We don't watch a video that's longer than 5 minutes. And that hit me. I'm like, why do we need 90 minutes to make this point? Couldn't we make this point in a much shorter period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And then my mom told me the story of a video that she watched while she was in a college summer program. And it was about sexual harassment. And
Mm-hmm.
she started describing the video to me in detail, animated, 5-minute long video. And I went online and looked at it, and it had humor. It was captivating, and it
Mm-hmm.
was following. I'm like, you know what? If it's stuck with my daughter a year later,
Yeah.
younger people want to watch these short videos. Now, we may still have to do the 90-minute video under the law,
Right.
but why do we have to stop there? So what we started doing is we started making our own integrity video, 1 a month, 5. Our rule was it had to be under 5 minutes. And if you're thinking, oh, well, my company doesn't have the production value, we don't do that. Here's my camera that we use. And the only rule was it had to have humor, and it had to feature a leader. Because what I learned about the psychology of this is that leaders are the carriers, and integrity is contagious.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we started doing these videos, and we said, you know what? They're not required. They're not required. Watch it if you want to watch it. Threw it out by email. Within 6 months, 2/3 of the company is watching an integrity video voluntarily.
Wow.
Right? And they were laughing, and they were sending in suggestions. They couldn't believe that the general counsel or the head of marketing was doing this, but people were watching it. They were paying attention. So I guess my point behind all of this is, it started organically with a challenge to do something creative and different. And it sort of came to the realization of this is really making a difference in the culture. And so we added the title Chief Ethics Officer to my title to reflect the fact that this was so important to the company that a leader is taking it on.
That's great. What a story.
Yeah. And by the way, that led to my book, which while we're here, the book's called Intentional Integrity. It's found by Macmillan, available at fine bookstores everywhere. And the book is the story of all the things that we did to drive integrity into the culture and how we really believe that it didn't cost money. It actually made us a better company and actually, I think, contributed financially to the bottom line. And the book tells the story.
And I've read the book, and it's good. Although I will admit, I read it like 2 years ago after you gave a talk at Full Stack GC, one of the Tech GC conferences on this topic. Let's talk about the book for a second. When did you decide that you wanted to write it? Was this as you were starting to leave Airbnb? Did you think it would be a great thing to do there? Like, how did this come about?
But my wife wanted me to write a book, and my wife really early was a book agent. That was earlier in her career. She was actually the book agent for Carlos Santana, Kamala Harris's book.
Wow.
I mean, a number of big league books. So she knew the industry. And I started telling her the story of what we were doing at Airbnb. And she said, no other company's doing this. This is a story that needs to be told. I'm like, yeah. I got a day job. It's a general counsel thing that's keeping me up half long as it is. But she wouldn't let it go. And she said, I'll get you a writer, and I'll get you a major publishing deal if you'll do this. I'm like, yeah, you get me a writer and a major publishing deal, and I'll do the book. And of course, months later, we had a writer and a major publishing deal. And so I did it while I was general counsel, and I did it not really thinking about anything beyond just getting the book done. I gave the writer every Monday night for a year. And I spent every night with the writer doing it, and the writer was terrific. She captured my voice really well. And then the problem really came up was that I really loved the project and really recognized that it could make a difference. And then I also realized that publishers don't market books. The author has to do it. So if I was going to do anything, I was going to have to go out, do podcasts, do book tour, do speaking in order to make the book go. So the book was either going to die because I was going to go back to my, stay being a general counsel, or I've been a lawyer at that point. I've been a lawyer for 35 years. And it was, I've been killing myself working the law models, a lot of stress. I'd like to spend a little more time with my kids. Why not make the book the next chapter? Because again, I've been doing the Airbnb thing for a little over 5 years. So why not make a chapter of my life? So that's what I did.
Let's talk a little bit. I mean, you set out in the book sort of a variety of or 6 sort of main themes or steps that companies can take. I guess what I'm most curious about, maybe for my audience, is let's say that people don't have an integrity program yet. They're a general counsel. They have a compliance program. What's some low hanging fruit here? How do people get started? What might they be able to take away and start doing as soon as next week after they listen to this episode?
Well, the thing is, it doesn't cost a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big barrier. Um, I think the first thing we started with was a code of ethics. And and I know the person, oh, we've got a code of ethics. I'm like, yeah, you got a code of ethics. You probably went online and copied it from another company and substituted your company's name in there, right? So what we did was, the first thing I did with ethics and integrity was I gave it away. I hate to admit it, but people aren't crazy about lawyers and going to talk to lawyers at companies.
Sure.
And why does the legal department have to own it? Everybody should own it. So what we did was we created this program called Ethics Advisors. And the goal was find one person in every group or every office who's senior enough to be respected, thought of as having integrity, but not so senior that they're scared.
Mm-hmm.
So we went to these people individually and said, we'd like your help in being an integrity officer. And it's something you can add to your professional career. It's volunteer and it's your job. But basically what you will do is you will be a voice in helping us put together an updated code of ethics. And you'll also be a resource for anyone on your team who has a question. And people saw the benefit of this, felt that integrity was something they wanted to add to their brand and they could add it to their resume. Mm-hmm. They took on the volunteer job, and we worked with the group to help update a code of ethics that was more authentic and in the company's voice. Mm-hmm. And then announced that they were the ethics officer for their team. And we told the team, if you got an ethics question, you can use the hotline. You can go to the legal department. You can go to HR, or you can just ask this person right here on your team. And what we learned in the next year, because we tracked all of this, we got ethics questions and input, and we would track where it came from. The number one way that ethics questions came into the company, guess what? It was through these ethics officers, because people were very comfortable to walk over to somebody's desk and ask a casual question. They weren't quite so eager to become a whistleblower or go to legal. Mm-hmm. So what we found is that we had a lot of good questions and we learned a lot of interesting things just by having somebody on the ground in the department that cared about it and thought about it. And free to do. It was a great group we had our own Slack channel. And as the general counsel, I oversaw it and coordinated to make sure that we were all providing consistent advice and all aligned. Mm-hmm. But I also learned a lot about ethical issues that were going on inside the company that I wasn't really even aware of. Mm-hmm. I learned what questions were on people's mind. In other words, the more you kind of broaden this and make it something that you get bigger participation in, the more valuable it is. So I think that's one element of an integrity program that's relatively easy to do, but can really start to change the culture because it gets its tentacles out throughout the company.
I love that, because I think that it's true. People are a little bit scared to call up the general counsel or the AGC for investigations or when they have a question. And obviously there are things where there are bright lines where certain behavior is right. Like you have to say to the company, you cannot do this, right? You cannot bribe a foreign official or as one example, right? That being said, you want people to buy in and feel like this isn't a sort of hunt that's out to get them. It's in everyone's interest, and it's about building the right culture for the place.
There's a temptation, anything close to bribery. Who's going to know about it? Well, probably the person on the team is going to have, who's on the ground working with it, would have more awareness. that this might go on. And now they understand that they've got a responsibility to speak up, and be a resource here, as opposed to remaining silent in fear if they see something like that happen.
I understand if some of it's privileged. I don't know. Was there any category of questions or that came to you that was really surprising to you, or you really learned something? I mean, FCPA, or I mean, that's sort of like an obvious example, or sexual harassment, like you've brought up, or anything that was surprising in that.
There are always conflicts of interest. If you're a company, I mean, I've heard people say, "Well, Rob, I'm glad you did this integrity stuff, but we've got a hotline and we don't get any reports, so I don't think we got any issues." I'm like, dude, that's the first sign that you've got a problem. Because there are conflict of interest issues, for example, everywhere. And if you aren't getting any questions about conflicts of interest, it's because people don't even recognize that there is a potential conflict of interest. Right? So I would say all kinds of conflicts of interest around gifts, for example, take or gifts to vendors, or vendors giving gifts to you.
Sure.
There were, or even romantic relationships. Can you have a relationship with someone you work with? The answer to that is maybe. Depends on the nature of the relationship, right? So there are lots of different interesting gray kinds of questions that can come up. That, like my brother-in-law wants a job at the company. Can I recommend him for a job? Can I tell him where to put his resume in? Can I be on the interview panel? So you get all different flavors of these things. But I think I viewed it as a positive when we had an increase in the number of ethics questions that came in the door. I view an absence of such questions to mean that people are not thinking about it, not sensitive to it, and or scared to raise it.
As you've now sort of like seen people read the book, begin to consult for companies around integrity, do you feel like there's more awareness now than there was before? And do you feel like GCs care more about this maybe than they did before? They're not just thinking sort of strictly in a compliance sense, and maybe in the way that they might have been 20 years ago?
The best thing about writing this book, the best thing is you get the email, the LinkedIn, the phone call from somebody who said, "I read your book. Wow, we implemented these 3 things and it's been so successful. I just want you to know how much I appreciate, how grateful I am." That's like, okay, it was all worth it. It's all worth it, those sorts of things. So I know that there are a number of places. And by the way, I get these things from all over the world. Like I get one of these from Argentina, or I'll get one from Brussels, or I'll get one from Norway, and be like, wow, this is amazing. But so I know it's had an impact, and that makes all the work worthwhile. That said, not everybody's read the book. There are a lot of companies they're thinking we've got a compliance program, so we don't need to do anything else. And my point is, your compliance program will be a lot more effective if you layer an integrity program on top of it, and it won't cost you any money to do it, and it will ultimately save you headaches down the line. So, I keep talking about it because I think a lot of companies still aren't thinking about this sort of thing and aren't doing it. And I think it's a mistake.
Besides reading the book, are there other places that people can find you, or sort of your site insights and content that you would encourage people to navigate to?
Now, don't show up at my house. That would be creepy. You could go to LinkedIn and find me on LinkedIn. There's a website, believe it or not. Intentionalintegrity.com is another good way to find me. But look, if you like what you hear, go click on me on LinkedIn and connect with me, and I'm happy. I enjoy jumping on even a quick call, and happy to chat with the people who are interested in this, because I think it's really important work.
And I've read some of your articles in Bloomberg Law as well. I've enjoyed some of those because I think you bring sort of cases that are in the news or in the media, and then put them in this lens or view them through this lens of integrity, right? Like what might have been done differently.
We'll put it. It's almost like putting on integrity glasses, looking at it way. And yeah, I write a column called Good Counsel for Bloomberg. I think it's even outside the paywall. They should make you pay for this stuff, but I think it's free. So you can also check out my articles there.
A few fun questions for you, Rob, as we start to wrap up that I like to ask my guests. I mean, your day-to-day is a little bit different now than it once was when you were a GC, but your favorite part of your day-to-day?
Well, my daughter's an actress, and so there are times where she has me read lines. I help her read lines for auditions. My son's a senior on the high school golf team. So going out and playing 9 holes of golf with my son at the end of the day. So those are 2 things I didn't get a chance to do very much, at all before when it was crazy. So those are my favorite parts of the day right now.
Those are great. I think this one's kind of funny. If you have a professional pet peeve, what is it?
A professional pet peeve. Let's see. I think it's, I don't know. I think maybe it's people who aren't, who lack self-awareness. People who take constructive feedback negatively.
Mm-hmm.
People who fight you on it. Because I think feedback is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get feedback about your work that is less than 100% complimentary, it is actually the only way you're going to get better.
Mm-hmm.
If all the feedback you ever get is how fabulous you are, you'll never get better. And it's not true, because everybody's got things they can work on. So a pet peeve is somebody who fights you on it. And so, my response is, the more you fight me, the more uncomfortable you make it for me to give you feedback like this, which means you're going to get less of it, which means you're going to suffer. And even if you disagree with it, which is totally fine, what you ought to be asking is, why does Rob see this? It's not what I think is accurate, but clearly Rob's seeing it.
Right.
So you need to ask the question of why what I do is giving off this vibe or giving off this misconception. So my pet peeve is people who fight it instead of explore it, because I think ultimately we all lose when that happens.
That's interesting. I like that answer. That's good. Okay, besides your own, if you have a book recommendation for our audience, it doesn't have to be a business book. It could just be something fun, but whatever you've got.
So many great ones. Anything by Adam Grant. If you can go read Adam Grant's Give and Take.
Yes.
Think Again, for example, a wonderful book. There's a book called The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle that's really wonderful if you're thinking about how to build a culture inside of a company that it gets the most out of people. I've got there's a great book on career. If you're thinking about your career, if you're feeling a little lost in life and you're trying to think about, what should you do next? There's a book called Ikigai, Ikigai. It's a Japanese concept around your purpose in life that I think really helps provide a framework for thinking about what you would like to do. Hold on, I'll give you 2 more. I'm looking at my bookshelf for those of you who can't see me here. There's a book called Multipliers. It's by Liz Wiseman. And it's about this idea of, as a leader, you're either getting a fraction of someone's abilities, or you are actually making them even better, greater than they thought they could be. Walt Whitman, for me, pushed me and challenged me to do things I didn't think I could do. So she was a multiplier. But there are a number of leaders who I think don't get the most out of their people. Liz Wiseman's book, Multipliers, is, I think, an outstanding book to help you become a better leader. And the last one I'll pick is Matthew Syed, Syed, a book called Rebel Ideas. So a really great thinker about, in today's world where diversity, equity, inclusion has sort of become a bad phrase, what does diversity mean? And how can it be? I think there's actually not that much difference between hiring with a diversity in mind and hiring with excellence and merit in mind. I actually think the two concepts are in many ways synonymous. So his work will help you think in that regard.
You've given me enough books to take like all my work flights between now and the end of the summer. This is fantastic. Last question for you, Rob. My traditional closing question for my guests. It's, if you could look back on your days being a young lawyer, just getting started, maybe at the Department of Justice, something that you know now that you wish that you'd known back then.
Well, I think I'll just reiterate an earlier point that it's very hard to map out where you think a great career will be. If you do that, if you think, oh, I want to be X job one day, you may miss a lot of fascinating things along the way. A career is like a long journey with a lot of side paths, and you just don't know what opportunities are going to come your way. But I was a little shy, I think, and a little, I was an only child, a little introverted, and that will kill you in life if you that dominate. So I think a key is get out there, try new things, be curious. If you're watching a lot of, if you're binge watching a lot of television shows, you're spending a lot of time watching television and the like, you need some of that to unwind, but I would suggest getting out, meeting people, exposing yourself to new ideas, take up a new hobby. You never know when a new hobby or is going to lead in an interesting direction, or when you go to a seminar and you meet a particular person or hear a concept and where that's going to take you. So be open to different things on your journey and get out and be an active engager with the world.
I love that. Great answer. And especially the first part of that, really one of the main themes of this podcast. There's no one right path in the law or legal adjacent roles in the profession. And you can have really meaningful careers full of twists and turns, just like you've had. Thank you, Rob. Thank you so much for joining me today for this episode of The Abstract. This has been a lot of fun for me.
Well, I had a great time. Thanks for an interesting conversation, Tyler.
And thank you to all of our listeners, and we hope to see you next time.